Right, so what we saw last section was in 1848, the conservative order was too strong for the nationalists to fight against. That's why the Italian revolutions, for instance, failed, and the Czech rebellion failed. So what we need, if you're a nationalist, what we need is the concert of Europe to break down, that informal alliance to break down. Because if that goes away, then the principle of intervention goes away. Well, the nationalists get exactly that. As the Ottoman Empire begins to slowly decline, Russia begins to eye some of its territory. Russia wants to expand. Russia, in particular, wants the Crimean Peninsula because that would give them access to and control of the Black Sea. Right? And this starts a Crimean War. The Russians attack the Ottomans because they want Ottoman territory. But if Russia gets bigger, that will upset the balance of power, and that makes other members of Europe upset. So in the Crimean War, it ends up being the Russians fighting against the British, the French, and the Ottomans. So now the British and French are now enemies of Russia. The concert of Europe is over, right? So the Crimean War kills the concert of Europe, and if there's no concert of Europe, then there's no principle of intervention. So now, let's say the Italian states rebel, France isn't going to come and help Austria anymore. Or if there are rebellions in Hungary, Russia's not going to help Austria anymore because Austria didn't help Russia in the Crimean War. So there's no more concert of Europe, so there's no more intervention. You can see this at work in German unification. Remember, there was no country called Germany yet. There was a German Confederation made of a bunch of different German states and kingdoms, the largest of which was Prussia, but no one unified country. The man that's going to be responsible for unifying Germany was not a liberal, definitely not a liberal, but he was a nationalist, and he saw the handwriting on the wall. He knew Germany was going to be unified. You couldn't really stop it. It was only a matter of time. He wanted to make sure that his Germanic kingdom, Prussia, was the leader of that. So Otto von Bismarck was the chancellor of Prussia, like the prime minister of Prussia, right? And Bismarck followed this concept of realpolitik, the politics of reality, right, instead of morality. He's very Machiavellian. Do whatever it takes to win, to succeed. Make alliances, even if you're uncomfortable with them. Betray those alliances later. Hijack the feelings of liberalism and nationalism if you have to, just to make sure that you, and therefore Prussia, stay in power. In fact, even use war. He said the great questions of the day will be solved by iron and blood. He also said that the German people did not turn to Prussia for its liberalism, but for its military might. And so, William the First of Prussia, right? He appoints Bismarck as his prime minister or chancellor, right? And then Prussia, led by Bismarck, convinces Austria to fight against Denmark to gain some territory that had Germans in it. So Prussia and Austria split the gained territory. But then Prussia ends up fighting Austria, its former ally, to get that territory that they split after they fought Denmark, right? And this forces Austria out of the German Confederation. Therefore, Prussia is clearly the leader of the German Confederation. And what happens not long after that is the northern Germanic kingdoms actually unite and form the North German Confederation. The southern German states, they don't want to unify quite yet, as many of the southern German states are Catholic, the northern German states were Protestant. They were a little uncomfortable with that, even in the 1800s. But the southern German states do agree to make a military alliance with the North German Confederation, where if one country attacks the north, the south will help, or if someone attacks the south, the north will help. So what Bismarck needs is he needs to trigger another war, which he does. He triggers the Franco-Prussian War against France. And he does it in such a way that France declares war on Prussia. It makes France look like the aggressor. So then Otto von Bismarck turns to the southern German states and say, hey, you're gonna let France, right, attack your fellow Germans. You need to help us out. And the southern German states, well, you're right, we do. We need to help you out because you're our fellow Germans, right? And they unite and they fight against France, and the war is a disaster for France. France loses quite handily. It's an easy victory for Prussia. And after this, Germany is unified with William the First. It's very first Kaiser or Emperor, and Otto von Bismarck, its first Chancellor of this brand new united Germany. Right? Now, another important consequence of this is France has to give Germany this territory called Alsace and Lorraine. You need to remember that, not just for this test, but for when we come back at the start of the semester, because France is always going to want Alsace and Lorraine back. They're always going to look for an opportunity to get it back, and they're going to get an opportunity in something we call World War One. Right? And from the very first day that Germany is created, it is one of, if not the most powerful country in Europe. It is large in size, it is large in army, it is large in industry, it is large in economy. The balance of power has been obliterated. And why didn't anyone stop it? Because there's no intervention anymore, because there's no concert of Europe anymore, because of the Crimean War.